You are listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. President Obama saying we need to open our hearts, open our minds, don't take it out on the poor innocent victims of the war in Syria, and close our doors to refugee resettlement. Lots of interesting analysis out there, but much of it very skeptically directed toward the United States of America. It's amazing to see the international frustration with this guy who came into office with all of his apologies and all of the, remember the crowds in Berlin and the crowds in Istanbul for President Obama when he was just sworn into office, and it was, I come here as a citizen of the world, and we've been arrogant and dismissive and even derisive toward other countries. Oh, yes, it's our savior. Now they don't seem to like Obama very much over there in Europe. Joining us now, Governor of the great state of Texas, a Lone Star state, Greg Abbott's with us now. Just breaking news, a decision of Texas not to allow, at least suspend for now, the resettlement of refugees from Syria into the state of Texas. Governor Abbott, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Laura.
So Governor, Alabama and Michigan, along now with Texas, all saying, we just can't risk this. They don't trust the vetting of these refugees, and apparently the citizenry of these states indicate they don't want this either. Tell us about your decision and how you came to it.
Well, our decision is much more extensive, and we explain in far more detail what is going on, and that is because of the very real challenges that Texas has had with regard to ISIS, as well as with regard to Syrians coming across our southern border. First of all, with regard to what has happened in Texas with ISIS. ISIS claimed credit last May when two terrorist gunmen launched an attack in Garland, Texas. You saw this on TV. And then less than 2 weeks later, the FBI arrested an Iraqi-born man in North Texas and charged him with lying to federal agents about traveling to Syria to fight with ISIS. And then back when I was Attorney General last year, we participated in a joint terrorism task force that arrested two residents in Austin, the state's capital, for providing material support to terrorists, including ISIS. And then on top of that, I can't even count the number of, I actually asked for a count, and it's in the hundreds of the number of Syrians who have crossed our southern border, who have been apprehended. And mind you, those are the ones who are apprehended. And mind you also, Laura, a Syrian coming across our southern border is not someone coming over here to work in the agricultural fields. We don't know who these people are or what they're doing, but we do know they are coming from a nation or a state that is connected with terrorism, posing very real danger to the people in this state and in this country. And I sent a letter to the president, and I said specifically this. I said, quote to the president, neither you nor any federal official can guarantee that Syrian refugees will not be part of any terroristic activity.
Yeah, and they won't confirm that, and they can't confirm it, contrary to what the president said today in Turkey.
Well, I got to tell you, Laura, that what the president said today and what the president has said repeatedly has been contradicted by the FBI director, who testified to Congress last month that the federal government does not have the ability to conduct proper security checks on Syrian nationals. He said, and I'm going to quote, we can query our database until the cows come home, but there will be nothing show up because we have no record of them. If the FBI, if all the other federal officials say they can't track these people, they can't distinguish whether or not this person is going to be dangerous or that person is not going to be dangerous, it is insanity to allow these people to be coming into our nation.
We're talking to the governor of the great state of Texas, Greg Abbott, who has joined the Alabama governor and Rick Snyder, governor of Michigan, in saying, no, we can't do this. We can't take this. We can't take these refugees. And back a year ago, Governor Abbott, the Midland County Sheriff Gary Painter, he pointed out that the open border in Texas had meant that terrorists from the Islamic State and Syria could be crossing the border, and he said that they had gotten some credible information that ISIS had made its way in some way, shape, or form into the Juarez state of Mexico, in the Juarez region of Mexico. And he was kind of laughed at. I remember when he came out and said this, they said, "Oh, ha, 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 what information do you have?" Can you shed any more light on that for us? And this was Sheriff Painter back in September of 2014.
Well, his concerns are corroborated in two different ways. One is the fact that in the state of Texas, we have had multiple incidences as well as arrests or deaths associated with members of ISIS who were attempting to launch attacks either in the state of Texas or in preparation to go join ISIS in Syria. Secondly, the countless, as in hundreds, of Syrians alone who were trying to cross the U.S. border, and it's unknown the extent to which the number of those were connected with ISIS. And, of course, there could be members of ISIS that would be coming here from countries other than Syria. So it is a fact that there have been people from Syria, some of whom have been connected with ISIS, who are coming into the state of Texas through our southern border. And this is one of the reasons why Texas has taken the lead, and we just concluded a legislative session where we passed the toughest, the strongest state-based border security plan of any state in the nation ever, with the state taxpayers coming out of pocket to the tune of almost $1 billion to ensure that we put more boots on the ground, more boats in the water, more planes in the air, more cameras detecting border to border from the state of Texas Gulf Coast all the way over to New Mexico. Any cross-border activity, because the United States has left us vulnerable
in the lurch.
Because in the lurch.
Totally in the lurch. Governor, we're going to hold you over because we have to get into a lot more with you, including your reaction to what President Obama said today about the strategy against ISIS. Governor of the great state of Texas is with us, Greg Abbott. Decision, no refugees coming into Texas, Michigan, or Alabama. What do you want your state to do? We want to hear from you. 855-40-LAURA. I'll be on the O'Reilly Factor tonight, so make sure to tune in. 800-495-8020.
Folks want to pop off and have opinions about what they think they would do, present a specific plan. But what I'm not interested in doing is posing or pursuing some notion of American leadership or America winning or whatever other slogans they come up with that has no relationship to what is actually going to work to protect the American people and to protect people in the region who are getting killed and to protect our allies and people like France. I'm too busy for that.
855-40-LAURA. President Obama today, and the French president gets up at Versailles and gets a standing ovation saying we're going to suspend the French Constitution, we're going to strip citizenship from these ISIL collaborators, and it's time to stop the refugee flow throughout the European Union, many people are saying, and I think that they've just had about enough over there. The question is, what are we going to do here? We continue with the governor of the great state of Texas, and I'm just delighted he's with us. Greg Abbott's an old friend of the program, and real leadership at a time like this requires resolve and pragmatism, and doing things that might not satisfy the elites or the Harvard faculty, but may just be the right thing for your own citizenry. And we continue with Governor Abbott now. Governor, you heard the president. He got a little testy when he was questioned today in Turkey, but clearly he's getting heat from some of the usual suspects who are usually cheering Obama on.
Well, there's a reason for it, Laura, and that is because he is putting Americans at danger. And he's done that in two ways. One, by not engaging ISIS to begin with. Everyone knows back when he called ISIS the JV, and he got hit on that this morning. And now they've turned into not just the varsity, but is reigning champions over in the region by controlling the entire region over there. And if France is responding appropriately, I was so proud to see those jets taking off all night last night as they were going on bombing missions. But the second reason why the president is taking heat is because, Laura, there is one fundamental responsibility more than any other that anybody who takes the oath of office, whether it be as president or as governor or as mayor, and that is first and foremost, we must keep our people safe. And the policies that are being pursued by this president are endangering our fellow Americans. And as we were talking about earlier, the federal government officials have admitted they have absolutely no way whatsoever of being able to track these people who they are admitting into the United States from Syria as refugees. And because of that, we don't know whether or not one or more or any of these people could pose the kind of danger that the Syrian refugees posed in Paris. Remember this, and that is we know that at least one of the people, maybe more than one of the people who were involved in Paris attacks were Syrian refugees. It is reprehensible for the United States of America to allow any Syrian refugee across our border, knowing full well that we can keep them out, that we must keep them out, if we are to keep our fellow Americans safe.
Well, apparently the Congress just learned last week about the resettlement in Louisiana and some of the other resettlement that's been going on and continues to go on in Arizona and beyond. So Congress is not being kept up to date about where these people are being sent until kind of the last possible minute. And the reason I think this is Governor, is that they know the public is against this. So they're not releasing information until it's too late.
Well, you raised a key point, and that is the alarm bells went off when the resettlement arose in Louisiana, and it did seem to catch people by surprise. And it is reprehensible for the federal government not to be telling citizens of the United States of America that this resettlement is taking place. But, Laura, as you know as well as anybody else, this resettlement has been taking place for years now, just not in this quasi-organized fashion. The resettlement has been taking place across the Texas border with Syrian, quote, refugees coming across our border to the tune of hundreds of people over the past few years. People who are coming here whose intent no one knows, whose background the federal government cannot determine, whose location where they're going to is not being tracked. We have no idea what these Syrians are doing and the danger they may impose. And let me tell you, if something like what happened in Paris occurs in the United States, it is because of the federal government's complete lack of control over our border and over these refugees who are crossing our border.
Has the FBI been in regular contact with you about this threat from the southern border crossed into Texas? Are they in contact with you regularly?
The FBI has not been in contact with me. Laura, it's important for me to point out that the FBI may have been and could have been, and I would not be surprised if they have been in contact with the Texas Department of Public Safety, which of course does report to me. But you use a word like a regular contact. What I don't know and what has not been reported to me from the Texas Department of Public Safety is the extent to which the FBI or any other federal officials are maintaining any ongoing monitoring or control. What I can tell you is that part of the information I have is public information, and that is the number of people who've been crossing the border and the countries from which they have come. And so it is a known fact that can be publicly discussed that people in the state of Texas as well as federal officials are fully aware that Syrians are crossing our border, as well as people who come from other countries of interest. I got to tell you, the Somalians who are coming across our border are just as dangerous as the Syrians. And we have Somalians coming across here. We've had members of Hezbollah who've been arrested here in the state of Texas. And so this isn't just one grouping of people, Laura. This is a massive broad swath of people who are crossing our border who pose a serious danger in our country. And just like France, welcome these people, just like Germany is welcoming these people, and they are now paying a heavy price for it. We cannot allow our fellow Americans to pay the same heavy price that people in Paris just paid because of this notion that we are a welcoming nation, which we are, and the humanitarian efforts are important. But we must first and foremost must be humanitarian with the people in the United States of America first.
Yeah, this global order is I mean, it's turned into a big suicide pact for member nations, right? I mean, if Europe has to take in 800,000, well, close to 3 million, 800,000 into Germany, and all these other countries are supposed to, upend their entire cultural system to accommodate all these people from the Middle East. And it's clearly being rejected by the people. And as far as I can tell, we don't get the proper information from our federal government. In fact, a lot of the pieces that I'm reading, Governor Abbott, shows that the FBI will usually respond by saying, oh, we don't have any definitive proof that people from the Middle East are crossing our border. There's no proof that ISIL is operating in border towns in Mexico. I mean, they at least publicly, and maybe they're doing this for a reason, publicly they kind of dismiss concerns like the ones you just raised.
I can tell you for a fact there is definitive proof that people from Syria, people from other countries of interest are crossing our border to a large extent. But let's just even put that aside. It is a fact because the FBI was involved, and this is very public, that 2 ISIS terrorists launched a gun attack in Garland, Texas. And it shows what Texas is made out of when just a single Garland police officer was able to take down both of those ISIS terrorists. It is a fact that the FBI arrested an Iraqi-born man in North Texas and charged him with lying to federal agents about traveling to Syria to fight with terrorists. And it's a fact that I, as the Attorney General of Texas, worked with a joint terrorism task force that arrested 2 people in Texas for providing material support to terrorists, including ISIS. So the connection between what is going on within just the state of Texas and members of ISIS is very real, is very public. And those are just the ones that are easy to find and very public.
By the way, a little difference of opinion between you and your colleague across the aisle, the governor of Minnesota, Mark Dayton, big liberal, of course. Mark Dayton said just last month that anyone who can't accept immigrants should find another state. And he said, this is Minnesota, and you have every right to be here. And anyone who cannot accept your right to be here, this is Minnesota, should find another state. So maybe all those people in Texas who are dying to have all these refugees, they can go live in Minnesota, I guess, with Mark Dayton.
I got news for you. And that is Syrians are crossing the northern border as well.
What's your evidence for that?
Well, I know that Syrians are crossing the northern border as well.
Okay, but you can't tell us why or how.
No.
Okay.
But I'm just telling you that Texas is not
Wouldn't surprise me. Texas, that's for sure.
Texas is not the only location where dangers.
By the way, Governor, there's a couple other questions I want to get to. I know you're really busy, but Jeb Bush has said that given the situation in Paris, what we should be focusing on is taking in Christian refugees, many of whom will be slaughtered in Syria if they're not brought into the United States. What about that idea?
Well, first, we do need to admit, Americans need to admit and confront the reality that there is a war on Christians. And it's a war on Christians that's taking place globally. Certainly it is occurring in Syria, but go back to that shooting at the community college in Oregon, where it was Christians who were targeted for the slayings that took place there. Point one, but point two, going back to what we've been talking about, we don't have any ability. The federal government officials have said we don't have any ability to identify which of these people are Christians or which may be members of ISIS. Remember this, these members of ISIS are clever enough that they will say, well, listen, I'm a poor, hapless Christian refugee. Let me into your country. And then they will come over here and plot and scheme. How does anybody, whether it be Jeb Bush or the FBI or anybody else, have the incredible insight to determine whether or not this person is a Christian or this person is a terrorist.
Don't you think, Governor, that this is one of those issues, the safety and security of the homeland, that is an issue that cuts across party lines? I think where lines might be drawn differently on tax reform or maybe even immigration amnesty or something like that. I think like Hispanic Americans and African Americans and just native-born Americans of all backgrounds, they don't want their country turned into a jihadi training ground. They're not interested in having this. So to me, this is just a common sense issue for pragmatic politicians to jump on because, number one, it's right, and just have the added benefit of, I think, getting a lot of bipartisan support.
Laura, from the evidence that I've talked to you about already, Texas has in part been a jihadi training ground. This is very serious, and Americans need to wake up to the fact that this is going to expand. And it's kind of odd that you mentioned the point about the Minnesota official, because if I recall correctly, it was just a month ago when the United States Attorney in Minnesota said that Minnesota is turning into an ISIS training ground. This is something that is permeating across the entire United States of America, and Americans must put our foot down right now and say no more, because our lives are at risk, our communities are in danger, and we will replicate what happened in Paris unless we robustly respond to this and we secure our borders.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. We have a little bit of a delay here. Before we let you go, Dallas County Sheriff Lupe Valdez apparently provoked your threat of taking funding away from the sanctuary cities within Texas, because he announced that the nation's 7th largest jail may no longer honor all federal requests to keep certain immigrant suspects in extended custody under the Secure Communities program. So Dallas County may not honor these immigration detainers in the future. What of that? And how far will you go to stop the sanctuary policies of your own state?
Two quick things. One is we are working on a law that will be passed. We will pass a law that prohibits sanctuary cities in Texas. Two, more quickly, because I had the ability to unilaterally do this, there are grants that come from the Texas governor's office to sheriff's offices, and I say no more grants from the governor's office to any sheriff responsible for these ICE detainers, because we're not going to be funding sheriffs who refuse to follow, comply, and enforce the law.
Lupe Valdez, the sheriff in this part of Texas, Dallas County. Fascinating. Governor Abbott, you are so kind to extend all this time to us. We really appreciate it. And some of us are coming to Texas for the holidays, so you never know what will happen when the Ingraham family descends upon Texas. Don't go away. Thank you, Governor.
The Laura Ingraham Show.